The metronome is one of the most important tools in the musician practice arsenal, but even though it's quite straightforward to use, sometimes we may not use it correctly or we might not know all the functions in there that can really help us in our practice. In this video, I hope to break this all down and share how to use a metronome for beginners. I'll recap why it's important to practice with a metronome and discuss the various types of metronomes and where you can access them. Make sure to stick around to the end of this video too, as I will share one of my favorite ways of practicing that has helped me tackle many rhythm problems I've faced. Hey guys, welcome to this channel. My name is Yao Tong and I'm a freelance musician based in Singapore. As part of my portfolio of work, I teach and conduct in 3 local school bands, and I'm very proud to have started my music journey from our school band system. This is the 6th episode of the Beginner Band series. I'll leave a link for you to click on to check out the rest of this playlist. All the videos in this series will be focused on helping you get the best start to your music or band experience, so do subscribe to make sure you don't miss anything. In my first video on this channel, I discussed 5 practice tips for beginners and advanced musicians. One of the tips I shared was to use a metronome in practice, and I received many questions and comments about this. This was slightly surprising to me, as the metronome was such a regular fixture in my own practice that using it was second nature, but I do see now how it's not something that comes naturally and we have to learn how to use it in our practice. So let's discuss all things metronome. Metronomes are basically devices that produce a sound or click at a regular interval. Musicians use the metronome in our practice to develop a steady pulse, and while we might not all love the metronome, in fact, I'm sure most of my students hate it, it is honestly our best teacher in many ways. One of the important principles of music making is playing in time, and the metronome solves this problem. Metronomes exist in many forms. Growing up, I used one of these while practicing the piano. This is a mechanical metronome, and you wind it out at the side and adjust the tempo by moving the weight in the middle up and down. I remember as a kid I used to love playing with this, but these days they are not quite as popular, though you can still definitely purchase them from your local music shop or online. I'll leave links in the description below for all the metronomes I mentioned in this video, so do check them out if you're interested. One of the advantages of using this mechanical metronome is that it's quite loud and gives you visual feedback when it swings from side to side. So if you're looking for something a bit more retro, this can be a good option for you, though it does not have many advanced features as some of the later metronome examples. The most common metronomes I see these days are the electronic or digital metronomes. These are powered by battery. They usually last for a long time, and I think every musician should own at least one of these. They come with a tuner function as well and are very hardy and compact to bring around. For this video, I will primarily be using this KORG TM50 metronome in my examples later on. I think the greatest advantage with this metronome is the fact that you are able to use this together with the tuner side by side. It is also very accurate and has some advanced subdivisions and functions in there that we will discuss a bit later. The third metronome option that's very common these days are apps on our smartphones. I previously shared that I think this is not the most desirable option, as our phones can be quite distracting, but I know that this works for many musicians. These days there are many free apps available. The app that I use is called Tempo on iOS, and it must have cost me $2 or something many years ago. I personally only use this as a last resort when I do not have my metronome on me. This is mainly because I really like to practice with the tuner function side by side, which is not always possible on my handphone, and I have to keep switching apps. Otherwise, this app is as good a metronome as the TM50, or possibly even better, as it has some advanced set lists or other customizable features to tailor to your needs. Rounding up our metronome options is a free version on Google if you search the word metronome. Of course, this is the most basic option and it's very limited in what it can do. But having said that, in many ways this is all you need to get started and can be accessed on your computer on your phone. So no one should ever say, I don't have a metronome. Now that we are familiar with all the various metronome options, do comment below on which option is your favorite and why. Mine is clearly the KORG TM50 and I think it's the best, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. With that out of the way, let's take a quick look at why we should practice with a metronome. I remember the tuba soloist Blazhevich sharing with me many years ago on how music teachers are in many ways just expensive metronomes. Of course, this is a joke, but having taught myself for a number of years now, I do agree with him that for most of the lessons that I teach, it inevitably ends up with me clapping or beating time for the student. While I don't expect this to change, and I do recognize that this comes up in lessons from time to time, I think it's very important for students to realize that we must reduce this as much as possible, and you can do that simply by practicing with a metronome. It then allows your teacher to focus on other aspects of music making in our lessons which will benefit you more. So remember, playing in time is your your responsibility and something that we can easily solve on our own. Other than helping us learn various tempos and to play in time consistently, the metronome also helps us establish the following things. It helps us identify problem areas in a piece. When we are practicing with a metronome, we will notice the areas where we are not able to keep up with the tempo we set. This is a big clue on areas where we need to zoom in to work more. The metronome also helps us keep track of our progress over time. When we learn a new piece, we are often not able to play it at the original tempo immediately. As we practice and get more fluent with it, we can then increase the tempo up to the original speed. Having a metronome in this case would help us see the progress over time, even if it's only one metronome number every few days. And of course, the metronome is also a very good click track. While predominantly used in pop music or outdoor shows, in our current climate where rehearsals are not quite possible yet, the metronome also serves as a unifying guide in playing together when we produce group videos to share online. I'd like to also mention here that having a reliable sense of rhythm and steady pulse is an important trait for any good musician and is one of the first things that can immediately distinguish an amateur from a pro. When we listen to music, any inaccuracies in rhythm or pulse makes us feel very uncomfortable and uneasy, like something feels not quite right. One of the mistakes I see a lot of beginner musicians do is playing the easy things fast and slowing down when things get difficult. These wild swings in tempo just don't work, and even repeating them countless times will not help you get better. In this next segment, I will go into detail on how to use a metronome in our practice. Before we start, I just want to quickly point out that your metronome has a feature which is able to tell you the tempo of any piece or song you hear. All you need to do is to click this button in time as you listen. The metronome then magically tells you the tempo. Of course, this can only be done on your electronic metronome or your phone, and this saves you from guessing the tempo of any piece you hear. Also, you are able to set the number of beats in your metronome. 4 beats in this case would mean the metronome makes a slightly different sound every 4 beats. We often use this different sound to signify the first beat of the bar. Depending on your time signature, you can adjust this number from 1 to 9, and it really helps to keep you in check where you are, especially if you made a mistake and end up playing in the wrong beat. So do try this out if you have never used this feature before. Assuming we are all new to the metronome, I think the first thing we need to do is internalize the beat before starting. This is currently set to crotchet equals 72. Feel this pulse, tap the crotchets together with this beat. As you feel more comfortable, try tapping quavers instead. And then after that, maybe we can try triplets and semi-quavers. This might all seem very simple, but it covers the 2 basic fundamentals of playing in time and subdivision of a beat. Once you are able to do this, you can then sing or clap any rhythm you need to learn with the metronome before playing your instrument. Most of us know that we should practice our breath exercises, long tones and scales with a metronome, but let's take a deeper look at some specific examples from the Blazhevich Studies on how we can use our metronomes to help us in our practice. While these are tuba studies, the principles behind the use of metronome is universal across all instruments and can be approached in a similar way. Study number 1 is a familiar favorite among tuba players, and I think it shows very clearly early on if a student possesses good rhythm and is able to play in time. The first 4 bars look easy enough, but students tend to play these 2 beats out of time. The tight minimum to a crotchet across the bar line is often played too short, and the quaver is often rushed or out of time. The first part is straightforward enough to solve. Once the metronome is on, we just need to keep counting and make sure the correct number of beats have occurred. Make sure it's 3 counts at the tight note. Here are the first 3 bars. For the second problem, there are 2 steps to solve this. The first would be to use the subdivision function on the metronome to beat quavers. With that on, we can practice making sure our quaver lines nicely with the quaver beats on the metronome. Here's the 4th bar repeated twice. Once that's secure, we can then set the metronome back to the usual 4 crotchet beats and make sure that we are still playing the correct rhythm with proper subdivision. I will usually count the 2 quavers that are silent in my head, and this helps ensure that the quaver I have to play is in the right place. I hope these 2 examples help illustrate how a metronome can help with rhythm and subdivision problems that arise in our practice. The other problem section I noticed in this study are the leaps in the middle section. Most students slow down here as these jumps are quite tricky. This is a perfect example of a section where we need to slow our practice down to give ourselves time to get used to the wide leaps. I might even play some of these quavers as crotchets, first to give myself more time to negotiate this. I will also practice this whole section slurred. After I get more comfortable with these intervals, I will then speed things up, hopefully to the tempo that I set out to do. A pro tip here is if you are not able to get this section up to the original tempo you started out with, and you need to perform it or play this in a lesson, it makes more sense to slow down the entire study instead of starting fast and then slowing down when you reach this section. Blazhevich study number 3 is also another example where the metronome can really help us in our practice. The dotted rhythms here pose a challenge for a lot of younger musicians and are often played as triplets instead. We can actually set this rhythm on our metronomes and practice with it. I hope this video has given you some new insights into why a metronome is so important in music making. I honestly do not think any practice can be effective without a metronome, and this is still something I do in my own practice all the time. The only time I start to use the metronome less is when I'm nearing a performance or recital and doing performance runs of my repertoire, and even then I would record myself and then check if I was playing in time. Of course, it's also possible to overuse and rely too much on metronomes, and this can result in a fixed and very rigid style of playing. Music is not played like this even if there are strict tempo markings. We must learn how to have expression and space for rubato to potentially happen while still playing in time. This is something that has always fascinated me, and we can only get better as we explore and experiment with this. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, do remember to like and share it with anyone you think who might benefit from it too. The next episode of the Beginner Band series will be on deciphering tempo markings and also explaining beats per minute. I originally intended to include them in this video, but because it's already so long, I thought it was best to leave it for next time. Do keep a lookout for that, and I'll see you in the next video.